Frank J. Avella with the Contending. Robert Altman's Nashville is considered by many to be one of the best films ever made. This sprawling 1975 epic dubbed an orgy for movie lovers by the influential critic Pauline Kael follows 24 characters over one weekend, culminating in a tragedy. The film and many of its cast members have been rightly celebrated, but Nashville's unsung hero, David Hayward, who delivers an enigmatic, subtle yet captivating turn as the clean-cut loner Kenny Frazier, has never gotten the due he so richly deserved. I'm thrilled to have him here today to discuss his film and his career. Welcome, David.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I appreciate that.
Well, it's heartfelt. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing very well, man.
Good. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with your background and what made you want to act.
It was the only thing I could do well. I mean, I was a mediocre student and a mediocre athlete. And the soccer coach said, why don't you just go over to the theater if you're going to act like that? And so I went to the theater. And the rest is kind of is history, kind of. I did a role, there's a play called No Time for Sergeants that Andy Griffiths did on Broadway. And they gave me the lead in that. And I was in a military school, which is also odd. But I got the lead in that. And one of the professors came up to me that we had not gotten along in the years I'd been there. And he said, Hayward, I don't like you. I said, yes, sir, I know. He said, but I got to tell you. He said, you're good at this. You should do this. And that really hit because I knew he didn't like me. I didn't like him either.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny you say that it's the only thing you could do. I feel the same way about, being a writer. I can't do anything else. I can't fix anything.
I can fix a lot of things, but I don't want to do it for anybody but me. So it's hard to make a living that way. But yeah, the only way I can really describe it is one time I was playing basketball, at which I was also mediocre, and I made a move and I went around a guy. And I realized that's how I felt about acting. I could make that move. I could shuck and jive and get where I wanted to go. And I'd never felt that anywhere else.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. And I know that I want to know a little bit about the years before Nashville. I know you did many guest appearances. I actually watched some, like on Mary Tyler Moore, Bewitched, Love American Style.
Oh my God. It was up and down. There'd be a really nice guest role, and then I'd do a few lines, and then I'd get a really nice guest role, and then I'd get some recurring things. And it was going along fine. And backtracking a little bit, when I first moved to LA, I joined an acting class. Just by happenstance, it was an incredible class. I mean, David Carradine, Barbara Hershey, Raquel Welch, Sharon Tate. It was an amazing group of people. And a guy named Richard Baskin, who we became best friends. And Richard and I went to he was still a student at USC, and we went to USC one night because there was a screening of MASH. And we snuck in because we didn't have any right to be there, I guess. And we watched that movie and we said, we got to work for this guy. This is amazing. And fade out, fade in to some years later, like 5 years later, 4 or 5 years later, Richard called me and he said he'd just gotten signed to do the music for Nashville. And I said, Richard, that's so great. He said, I'm going to try and get you in. I said, don't screw yourself up, man. Just do your job. And he got me an audition, and they already had this part cast. But I met with Bob's casting person, who's a lovely woman, Scotty Bushnell. And that was it. And then I got a call a few weeks later, and Richard said, what are you doing? I said, the usual, going on auditions, going home. And he said, Bob, Bob's casting, Scotty's going to call you. They want you here tomorrow. I said, why? He said, they lost the person that had that role, and Bob wants to meet with you. And I said, okay. And so that night I flew into Nashville. The guy who picked me up said, will you be leaving tomorrow? And I said, kind of hope not, but I don't know. And the next morning I met with Bob and we talked for a few minutes. He said, I always saw the guy as shorter. And I said, I got to tell you, being taller and skinnier than all your friends is a source of insecurity as much as being short. And he said, okay. He said, so we should cut his hair. And he's talking to his AD, Tommy Thompson. And I said, well, what does this mean? He said, Tommy said, yeah, you got the part. Just shh. And I said, okay. And then I went to get my hair cut and I was walking back from that. And Bob and I said, I should probably wear glasses. I want something to cut the edge of my massive masculinity. And I passed Bob in the hallway of the motel, and he said, simultaneously, we both said glasses.
Wow.
And so that was kind of the beginning of the creation of the character. And then I don't know where we want. How do you want this to go?
Well, I want to. So you had a legit audition with Scotty, and then cut to the meeting with Bob. That's the way it worked.
That's the way it worked. And the meeting with Scotty and the meeting with Bob were both conversations.
Wow.
There were no lines or anything. It was just, yeah, I think he can do it, kind of a thing.
That's incredible. Well, I know that you guys. How long was it to film? Because I know you were all together pretty much.
It was a total of, I think, 2 months. I think it was July and August.
Wow. And I know he also sent you guys all around Nashville to soak up the local color before filming.
Yeah, he did. Well, a lot of things happened before filming. When he and Catherine, who was an angel, had rented this beautiful log cabin outside of Nashville. As bucolic and charming as you can imagine that to be, it was. And he had us all out there for a barbecue, and we're all sitting around. And Ronnie was sitting and singing, and I was sitting on the floor in front of her along with other cast members. And I just was mesmerized. And I guess that was apparent because Bob tapped Catherine on the shoulder and pointed at me and said, do I know how to cast a movie or what? Because it was exactly what he wanted from that character, to be taken that much with Ronnie. And that was amazing to me. And then other things that happened, I decided to have a character, or maybe Bob mentioned it, of myself on the violin case. And so I got in costume and drove my character car, which was that green wrecked Dodge, out to Opryland and went out, in the amusement park and got the caricature done there. And some father and son walked by me, and the father said, see him? He can play. And I thought, if you only knew, man, there's a brick in this thing. There's nothing else but a brick. But it was great. One thing I realized, you interpret people's reactions to you, and you think you have something to do with that reaction. And I remember I was walking by some girl, and I kind of smiled, and Kenny was not a particularly appealing physical specimen. And she smiled back with a smile that I always assumed, oh, she likes me, I can talk to her now. And I realized that was just a standard girl response that I may have been misinterpreting most of my life. But it was a great lesson to be out there in character and staying in character through the whole time I was there. Helped a lot.
I can only imagine. Well, Joan Tewksbury, who wrote the script, but that was really just the blueprint. She said everybody was encouraged to improvise, and we
Yes.
all know that's how Bob worked. Can you speak a little bit about working this way and Altman's style of directing?
It's not only the improv, it's that he will let you go past where you should go, and then he'll cut you off in editing so you look brilliant. And when you've kind of lost it and dribble out, he's lost that. That's on the floor. And he just keeps the gold. And also, I mean, I'm comfortable with improv, so it wasn't a stretch, and I didn't have that many lines that it was, any task to do it. But what was great is when we shot in L.A. Jones' house, which he was staying where I moved into. When we were shooting in there, Bob said, "I'm going to put the camera here. What do you want to do?" And I stood in the corner and everything where I was going to shoot it, take the phone call from my mother. And he said, "Do you really want to have your back to the camera?" I said, "This is not a kid who would face out from a wall if he's on the phone." And Bob said, "Right." And so that was the kind of give and take, that was so beautiful. The scene where I first see Ronnie play at Operaland.
Yeah.
I wasn't in that scene. And I went to Bob the day before, as he had said we all should do. And I said, "I think it makes sense for me to be in the audience." He said, "It does." So, and then it ended up for me to be one of my best, not my best moment, but very poignant for my character.
It was an incredible. That shot is from that moment, and
Yes.
it's so important because we don't get a lot of background on Kenny. The phone call is super important too, and like you say, the way it was filmed, uh, all of those little pieces. Can you speak a little bit about your approach to the character and the conversations maybe you and Bob and Joe might have had?
Um, Bob kind of let me run with it. I mean, after he said the kid's insecure, and then we talked about it, but I can't remember anything specific. He really let me run. Joan and I talked a little bit more on the phone call. Joan was doing the voice of my mother on the other end of the line.
Oh.
So we kind of worked that out between us before we got on the phone, and then she threw a couple of curves on that. So it was just, I wish I could remember something specific. It's such an open door, in terms of, and the fact that everybody would be together for dailies at the end of the shoot, at the end of the day, just, gave rise to more conversations and to more, ways to understand the way Bob was doing, and also to see what everybody else was doing and the tone that was being set. So you knew just instinctively what tone you should have, what amount of energy, that it just should fit with the others.
Did you know Kenny's trajectory? Did you know when you started that he was going to end up shooting Barbara Jean?
Yes.
You did. Okay, so everything you based your backstory on came from that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, the research I did, I think the guy's name was Brimmer, David Brimmer, or is that a comedian? That's David Brenner. Anyway, was an assassin, and the interviews around him with everybody that he talked to, everyone said, before he did it, people from his hometown said he was such a nice guy. We never saw that coming. He was a sweetheart. So nobody saw this guy. He was just like a lot of the people now, today, that are doing that. They're just unnoticed. Yeah. And I think that's what he was, and he found a way to get noticed.
That's what's incredibly, it makes the film constantly timely. I mean, it's really sad in many ways, but you're sort of Kenny's the profile,
Yeah,
really, of so many of these shooters today.
of the incel, you know,
Yeah.
he absolutely is. And then, to get to kind of ground him, my father was the Ford tractor distributor for Ohio. And I wanted a Future Farmers of America jacket because I thought that would be perfect to show his origin, whether anyone else knew it but me or not. And so I got the jacket made and they stitched Kenny on it and everything. And I wore that jacket, and Future Farmers of America threatened to sue.
Oh, wow.
They called my father. My father said, "Oh, go ahead," because I only saw that as, raising my profile, and I hadn't done anything wrong. But
Okay.
they felt it was being uh, showing the FFA in a bad light.
Well, that's like the country music community at the time. A lot of people were talking about how they were making fun of country music. They weren't making fun of country music. It was an homage.
I had a lot of close friends that thought it was a real making. My friend, not that he's a country music artist, but my friend Christopher Guest thought it was a real um, slam on country music.
I never
And
felt that way.
uh, I heard it a couple of times. I didn't. I didn't feel that way. I thought there was some parody involved. Certainly. I mean, Henry's character was sensational, um,
Yeah, but
but
take
he
the
wasn't.
music out of that character. You know what I mean? And he's still, I think he was just parodying that type of person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then all of it, just to be around it and be involved in it and everything was great. When this is off the movie, but with the group having dinner one night, we saw a guy that we had hired to play piano for us at the restaurant, and we all said hi to him and everything, and we went and sat down. And when the check came, we said, "Let us pick up David's." His name was David as well. Pick up David's tab, and they said, "Okay." And then he came over and said, "You guys don't have to do this." I said, "No, no, we don't have to. We want to." He said, "Guys, I own the place. Okay." Basically, I own the block. And it was David Briggs, who was Elvis's piano player.
Oh my God.
So he didn't need our charity.
That's
But those are
funny.
the kind of people we had, coming in to do bits. Vassar Clemens. Uh,
Oh, he was amazing.
yeah. I mean, so to be, and I'm getting very excited wanting to do it again. To be in that community, and it was so tight. We were all staying in the same hotel, um, and yeah, you got people like Scott Glenn, just so many wonderful people, Keith, everybody. One thing when that thing I told you about when Bob said, "Do I know how to cast a movie?" One thing I left out of it is Scott was sitting right beside me, as mesmerized by Ronnie as I was.
That's
So,
amazing. Wow.
yeah.
Yeah. I I want to speak a little bit about Kenny because, and I don't know how much you want to protect this, so it's totally up to you. But Joan recently, actually, just a few months ago, said you deliberately kept Kenny's motivation a secret, and she encouraged you to locate his internal rage. But and there's been so much written about it. I have my own interpretations. I've seen the film. I can't even tell you how many times. But I'm curious what your personal approach to him was in that moment when he does what he does. Like, do you think it was premeditated?
Yes. And I think he went there to kill John Philip Walker because he felt if the world could change, he could be more accepted. If something major would happen, he could rise in the aftermath, kind of like Manson figured after a race war, he would be elevated. And I think Kenny, not that he would be elevated to that point, but that he would have some notoriety, he would have some celebrity. and by picking a political figure that that seemed to him to be the answer. And so he traveled to Nashville to get John Philip Walker. Was that the name?
Hal Philip Walker.
Hal Philip Walker. Uh, and then when Ronnie comes out, who had already been affected by it, and starts singing about her home and the love of her family and all that, he just lost it and just kind of came too soon. I mean, premature ejaculation is a bad motivation for a character, but I think I felt that that's what it was, that he saw this and that was everything he didn't have. She was singing about all that he didn't have. A home, and Idaho sounded like a special place to this kid from Ohio. And he just lost it.
Wow. You're giving me chills with that. That's where the phone call is so important too, because you realize he's got this kind of overbearing mother that he has no relationship with, really.
And is most concerned with what he's wearing and how other people will regard him.
Yeah.
Not how he regards himself or not how she regards him. She's trying to put him in a box. There was one other scene that got cut that I understand completely why it got cut, where I get the phone call that, oh no, let me remember this right. Oh, let's go. I'll come back to it. Shelley gets a phone call that Keenan has died.
Oh,
right. And originally, I got it. We both got that message on the phone, and Bob thought it dissipated from Shelley getting the call to have me get it first, and I understood it. I just loved the scene.
Mm. Well, I'm moving ahead a little bit. You mentioned cuts, and there's been so much written about what the cut that was shown to Pauline Kael was longer. It was a planned miniseries at a certain point where Bob was going to put footage back. Were you privy to any of those early larger cuts?
No, except that I saw all the dailies.
Okay.
I just never saw it together. I saw everything that was in the larger cuts. I just didn't see it as a large cut. But I ran into Bob in New York, and I think in Banks 80, somewhere around there, 81. And he was planning at that point on doing a sequel to it. And then that never happened. And then I was doing a soap and trying to get out of my contract and all that stuff. But anyway, I didn't have to, thankfully. But before that, pertaining to what you just said, he was planning on doing at one point Nashville Red and Nashville Blue, and do 2 movies from what had already been shot. And I don't know who put the kibosh on that, but that would have been great.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? And those lost footage, like if that would be like the holy grail to movie lovers.
Yeah, and when we all saw it, we all loved it, but we all did realize how much had not been there. Now, I think most people were concentrating on what if theirs wasn't there. Certainly I was. Yeah, I am an actor. I mean,
it makes sense as an actor, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was amazing. It spoils you. I mean, I had an audition afterwards for a movie that never got made called Bogart Slept Here.
Oh God, Mike Nichols?
Yeah. And De Niro ended up doing it, but they stops filming after a week or so because they didn't feel he was right. And I don't know what part I was meeting for, but I met with Nichols and Simon, and it went really well. I read some stuff, and they were laughing, and it was one of those blissful afternoons. And the next day, I had an audition for a kitty litter commercial, and I just blew up in the middle of it. The guy said something, no, 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 you really care that you got the wrong one. And I looked at the guy, and this cost me a lot too. I said, I really don't. You know, and I left and stopped doing commercials, which financially was insane. But I said, I just impressed Mike Nichols and Neil Simon, and now some commercial directors telling me that I have to care about kitty litter. It was hard.
I can imagine. And I have a bunch of questions about subsequent Nashville, but I wanna ask you about the filming the Parthenon scene, that final scene, because it's so powerful. And I read that you had poison ivy.
Oh God, yes.
And a fight with a teamster. Tell us about this.
Oh God, it was not with a teamster, with one of our crew, with our armorer, and he was right, but don't tell me that then. I had gone. I met a young lady, and we decided to go on a little canoe trip for the day. And I like diving off cliffs and stuff into water. And so we pulled the canoe over at a spot, and we could climb a tree to get up to this, and we both climbed up the tree. And I got up there, and it was really kind of sandstone and sketchy. And I said, I'm not going out to that point, you know. So I went back. Well, the only way to get down was to go back down the tree. And I'm in, you know, a t-shirt and cutoffs. And I basically slid down the tree. It was covered with poison ivy.
Oh my God.
Which I discovered the next day. So between each take, and the Parthenon scene was the next day, between each take, I was covering myself with common lotion and then wiping it off and going. It was kind of brutal. And the thing with the armor, I wanted the gun in the violin case the whole time, all the rehearsals, all the walkthroughs, all that stuff. And he said, no, we'll just give it to you when it's your shot. I said, no, you don't understand. I want the weight of it. And again, a brick would have done. But I said, I want the weight of it. I want to know the gun's in there. It's important to me. And we went back and forth. And I said, ask Bob. If he says I have to have a brick, I'll take a brick. And I walked away with the gun in the violin case. Now, is that the way an actor should behave? No, it's not. But I was in the throes of it, man, you know, and
I don't think it's that big a request. I think, you know, certain actors work a certain way, and I think you need to honor that. You know, I've directed before, and I don't think it was that, you know, horrible a request.
I maybe could have phrased it better with him. I have a feeling I didn't say please. I may have said, I'm keeping it in the cage, you know.
Yeah.
Which was a problem I had when push came to shove. And that was the argument. The argument I really had with Teamsters was one day when I wasn't shooting and I was driving around town in my character car. I drove to set. And I was talking to people and walking somewhere, and a Teamster kind of grabbed me and put me up against a trailer. Said, you working today? I said, no, and he said, why are you driving your character car? I said, well, because they let me drive. He said, but you're not working? I said, no. I said, you're driving that car to work. You put one of my boys out of work, you'll hear from us. Ooh. I said, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I wasn't mouthing off to this guy. So that was the only conflict I had with the Teamsters.
Another extraordinary thing that Bob does, but you know, Kenny pops up in all of these different places. He's at Opryland watching Karen Black, and I have to ask you about Karen Black because she was one of the greats who also, I think, never got her due. Um, Even though she was real big at that time.
She was. Karen, I didn't get close with Karen. In fact, I went out with the driver to pick her up at the airport when she came in, and until halfway through the next day, she thought I was a grip. So I did a little blow to my ego, but hey.
Wow. That's really funny, actually.
But she was great. I just didn't have a closeness with her. I was closer with people I didn't know before. Barbara Harris. Who else did I didn't know?
Oh, you had that wonderful scene with Barbara Harris. It's
Walking
short.
Around.
Oh,
Yeah, that was fun. That was fun. And did I did tell the story about paper on my violin strings. Did I tell that story?
no.
No, I was going to. Maybe it got cut. And in fifth grade, I'd been taking violin and I was hopeless. And we gave a concert and they had me put paper on my strings in the concert because I couldn't play, but I could sit in the stand.
That's
With the
funny.
orchestra.
Do you keep in touch with any of the Nashville actors?
Well, Keith, I see periodically. Henry, I kept in pretty frequent touch with. We both lived in Malibu, and so I would, see him periodically. Um, Ronnie, somewhat. I was at her baby shower and a couple things like that. Nobody else really.
Do you know what happened to Dave Peel by any chance?
Yeah, he went back to Nashville, and he and his wife have a company, or last I checked, have a company um, uh, writing like birthday songs for people,
Oh,
individual songs for occasions for people. And what's funny about David Peel is I did know him before. We had done a Charmin bathroom tissue commercial together as two singing stock boys. Charmin bathroom tissue gives you tenderness. A little tender touch wouldn't hurt.
oh my
And
God.
I don't sing, so they had to lube it, but David, of course, does. And with Harvey Limbeck was in it too.
Oh, wow.
That was like maybe my second or third job in town, 68.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay. So the film is released. It wasn't a monster hit, but it was a huge critical success. And then it gets a lot of awards attention. 11 Golden Globe nominations, still the record. All these people get recognized. BAFTA nominations, and then only 5 Oscar nominations, which actually was a sin, but at least it got 5. But you only received, you told me this over the phone, you got 1 nomination for something.
For Photoplay Magazine Newcomer of the Year award, which
Do you,
I did not win.
do you remember who you lost to?
I don't. I don't. And I had a I had a blow up, or not a blow up, but I had the magazine framed. But we lost our house in a fire like 6 years ago,
Oh,
and so all that stuff is gone.
oh, what a bummer.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I think honestly, it's my feeling that all those other performances, they're incredible, but they're big. And I think yours was so subtle, it was so psychologically nuanced that it was easy for you to just kind of get lost in the canvas, in the mosaic, not to be pretentious, but it is a mosaic.
yeah.
That's the most difficult kind of acting, though, David.
I I don't know. It wasn't. It was difficult for me only in that I knew I couldn't screw up. I'm this. If I screw this up, pretty much go back to Ohio. Uh, and so that pressure was on me. And the realization of who else was around me, and that it was an Altman picture, all of that stuff. But in terms of the acting itself, that was the release, the hanging out. I mean, I was there 2 months, I worked 13 days.
Mm,
So, you
okay.
know, a lot of hanging out, a lot of going to the set, but always with everybody every night at Daily. So I never felt out of it. It wasn't like doing a guest star in town that you go in for 3 days, you leave, you come back. You were part of the fabric.
And were the Altmans throwing the parties that they say that they always threw on
Yeah, they
sets?
threw a couple of good ones. And also, I mentioned Catherine before. Uh, I would have run away with her had she been at all interested. Now, she was just. I was going to say she was a mother hen, but she was also a very attractive mother hen, and she was the glue. You talked about things Altman said. He gave a speech about. He said, "Listen, if any crew member or anything does anything or says anything that upsets you or gets in your way or anything like that, you tell me, and they won't be there."
Wow.
And I think I think it was Karen who said, "What if one of us acts badly?" And he looked at me and he said, "All I can do is remember,"
Ooh. Okay.
which was a clear statement. Uh,
Well, he had a reputation for being really loyal and also for, if he got pissed off, and he had reason to get pissed off at Louise Fletcher, but if he got pissed off, he kind of cut you out. Why didn't you work with him again?
I would love to know that. Uh, I certainly would have given anything to. And when he was going to do the E.L. Doctor book,
Ragtime.
Ragtime, when he was going to do Ragtime, I I lobbied for Mother's younger brother, but Keith was in the slot for that.
Uh,
Uh, but I had an acting teacher, a brilliant acting teacher, one of the best, Joan Darling, who said something about going to parties and schmoozing at parties. And I said, "Joan, I'm just no good at that. Give me a script, let me audition. That's fine. I'm no good at pretending I like somebody. I screw it up. I look like an idiot." And she said, "Well, then you'll never make it." And that's kind of, I didn't have the cojones to call Bob and say, "Hey, can I work with you again?" Which I probably could have.
mm,
And it was that way with several people, that I wasn't comfortable doing that.
I understand. Believe me, I understand. Did you guys get along? You guys got along during filming, right?
We weren't buddies, but we got along fine.
Yeah.
I didn't, I mean, we never hung out, the two of us or anything like that, but I'd be with three or four people with Bob, we got along fine. And at the 25th anniversary, we had a nice time. So
Wow.
yeah, and you can't expect everybody to be your buddy or you to be everybody's buddy. As long as the working relationship is good and the respect is there, I did hear. I may have told you this when we talked before. Uh, I did hear like a day or two after the filming that somebody told me that Bob had said, "Did you see what David Hayward? Did you see where he had the key? It was in the violin. It was around his neck the whole time, the whole shoot, the key to the violin." So that made me feel great that he
Yeah.
thought that was good. And I hadn't told anyone that's what it was or that the case was locked.
Mm.
And it was fun to be unlocking it.
I can only imagine. My God. Oh, all right. So you're riding high, and the Nashville train is passing, and you do a bunch of TV guest spots and some horror movies. But where were the leading man parts? Did you turn shit down? What happened?
Um, I had an agent, a lovely woman, small agency, Diane Davis. She also handled some good people, Richard Farnsworth among them. And she had me audition for this TV pilot. And I had a friend of mine, director Ted Flicker, president's analyst. Um, anyway, Ted said, "You're not going to do TV now." I said, "You got to get rid of this agent. You got to get a big time agent." He said, "Let me make a phone call." And so he called Ronnie Meyer at William Morris before CAA existed.
Mm.
And William Morris signed me. And so my head got a little big for the hat. And I turned down the pilot for the series, which the series didn't make it, thank God. So I don't have to sit here and say I could have been a star. And then I just, I expected to get guest stars offered to me. I don't know why I expected that. I hadn't done that much. But that's what I expected. And that was the attitude I had. And, I kind of got on the party circuit and kept thinking I would do that. And then I bought this ramshackle house in Laurel Canyon, and I turned an audition down one time because I was working on the house. It was just, I just lost focus. I really did. And, I got a call from Ron Meyer. I'd only been at Morris for a few months, and he said, "I wanted to call you because you probably read about it in the trades," and I hadn't. And he said, "I'm leaving to form a new agency, and I'm sorry, but I'm not taking you with me." And I said, "Okay." And there was no one else there that I had a relationship with. And so I called this one guy and I said, "Look, I think we're not, I think I'm going to, I didn't want to say fire. I think I'm going to leave Morris." And he said to me, he said, "Well, why don't you let us release you instead? It'll look better." I said, "For whom?" He said, "Well, in general, people don't like thinking actors go around firing agents. So it'll look better for you if we let you go." I said, "I'm sorry. That's not going to happen."
Yeah.
So that's when I said, "No, I'm firing you." And they got kind of pissed off with me, but they didn't. There was no repercussions that I was aware of. And then I signed with this incredible agent that I had for 15 years, Susan Smith, who had just a lot of great people. And she ended up quitting the business to become a manager for Brian Dennehy and Kathy Bates.
Oh.
Because they were both clients before. And she did really well by me, but I was not giving her that much to work with a lot of the time. And I had, oh God, I had lived with never do this if you're an actor. I had lived with a casting director, and it was not going well. And I just left one day while she was at work without discussion. And then she became head of casting at a major studio, which cost me 2 series that I know of. Mm. And I had an attitude. I had a chip on my shoulder. And things just never blossomed. Occasionally I would think they were going to. There'd be a guest star that I did a guest star on Jag that I felt
which I watched, by the way, and it's
good.
Fantastic performance.
And then right after that, I got a series in China, and which was terrible. But I had 2 seasons of it, and it was. I said, okay, now this will. And
Well, that makes me want to ask you about The Legend of Lone Ranger because there were high hopes going into this movie. They thought it was going to be the next Superman, and
yeah,
it is not a great film. You have an interesting role in it, though. And the strangest thing about that movie is the lead, Spilsbury, Clinton Spilsbury, first film and last film.
uh, Clinton. I did the screen test for all the guys for the Lone Ranger in that the scene where I get shot. So we did that scene for their screen test. And my good friend John Perry tested for it, Matthew's father.
Oh.
Stephen Collins tested for it, and Clinton, and there were a couple other people tested for it. Clinton walked in for the test, and I said, they're going to cast him. They're just going to cast him. I could feel it. And it was like a 2 or 3 page scene. He couldn't remember the lines.
Mm.
So they cut the scene. And he was wooden, a sweetheart of a guy, absolute sweetheart of a guy, but wouldn't, couldn't do it. And then I heard they gave him the part, and they gave John, my friend John, his older brother. And we got on set, and he said, my scene with you after the massacre. I said, yeah. He said, they have it scheduled that we're shooting it before the massacre. I said, yeah. He said, I can't do that. I'm not a good enough actor to do that. So he refused to do that scene till after the massacre, which gave me about another 2.5 weeks on the job.
Oh my God.
But no, he just held him up, and he would do stuff like that.
What was wrong with
It
his voice that they completely had to redub it?
didn't sound real.
Mm.
You know, During the scenes that were shot, you couldn't tell as much, but apparently when they cut it, it was unbearable. And I didn't think Jimmy Keach's voice was anything to write home about, but that's between you and me. Because that's who dubbed him.
Yeah.
He was fine, and it's a hell of a thing to do. But yeah, his voice was just bad, and he had also nobody was looking to do him any favors because of the way he had been. Although I was talking to him. It was right after shooting, maybe I can't remember when, and I said something about I wanted to take my hat home, but they wouldn't let me. It's Western costumes. They wouldn't let me take it. And he said, that's too bad. So yeah, he stole the hat for me.
Ah.
Got it back to LA and gave it to me. I still have it. One of the things I saved before the fire. But yeah, he was a nice guy. Michael Horst was a kick in the butt. He worked hard for whatever his performance was. He was working it to make it as good as he could.
Yeah, you can tell, but I think the director was just not up to snuff. There's a reason why he was a cinematographer.
He was a cinematographer. He was just too nice, I think, was the problem. Now, thankfully, when I made requests, I could get them through. But he couldn't handle Clinton. He couldn't say, go back to your room. Here's what you're going to get for holding up production and so on and so forth. But he didn't do that. And it's too bad because it was there to be done. If you'd had a good actor in the beginning, the script could have done some tweaks. And I did notice in Jason Robards' obit, they didn't mention Legend no longer.
Probably deliberate. Well, there you go. There's an Oscar, two-time Oscar-winning actor, and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
couldn't elevate it. On Nashville, though, there were no egos, correct?
There was one, and I understand a little bit. Alan,
Mm.
no tales out of school. Alan's a wonderful actor, but he had gotten his wife in the movie, and she then wanted her name listed with the rest of the cast.
This is Alan Garfield, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in order, in the same alphabetical order.
Oh.
And Bob said, I can't do that because everyone's under contract, that there are 20 so many people. They're in alphabetical order, and that's it. And Alan got really upset, and Bob wrote out of the movie.
Oh, he did. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You never saw her again. The only time you saw her was coming in from the airport in the Jeep.
Wow.
And
That's interesting.
yeah, but it was, I was very lucky to be there. I'm glad I held it my own. And would that it had continued at that level, and may it again.
May it again. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
which brings me to Raven's Touch, which I got to watch a couple nights ago. And it's a beautiful film. And
It's a sweet little film.
yeah, and you're kind of the heart of the film, actually.
A little bit, yeah. It was funny because I mean, it's, basically about two gay women, and one, and there were many gay women there at the screening, and one of them came up to me and said, "You were my favorite character." And I said, "All right." That was my best. That was my biggest compliment.
I love that Joe drank whiskey with his meds.
Yes.
One of my favorite things.
Yeah. And I love doing that scene with Drea with the guitar.
She was so good.
She was. And the funny thing about that scene, like I said, I don't sing. And I went to a friend of mine who was a singer. And I said, "Can you help me?" And we worked with it. He said, "Okay, I'm not going to be able to teach you to sing, but I can teach you to sing in time. If not in tune, in time." And so he got me so I could do it, that people didn't know I couldn't sing.
So going back to Nashville for a moment, why is it you're not interviewed more about the film? Like, those of us who are film fanatics, we got the Blu-rays and now the 4Ks are coming out, and the DVDs, and before that VHS, and you're not really seen. I know you take part in some Q&As, but why is that?
You'd have to ask the people. They just don't see me as influential or as the audience for those things, for the Blu-rays and all that, are not clamoring for more Kenny, I guess. He was a small character, well done, I thought, but a small character. And I just don't think when you go to interview people about a movie like that with 20 some leads, basically, there are a lot of people to go to before you get to Kenny.
It's true, but he was such a significant one. I mean, yeah, again, I've seen it so many times, just watched it again the other day, and it strikes me how important this character is.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. There's the scene in the bar where I think it's where Vassar plays. And I'm at a table with Keith and Tina, and I stand up to like stop somebody, kind of to fight with him. I'd forgotten that. that was I'd forgotten that was in the movie. So when I was at the 25th anniversary screening, when my character stood up, I started to tell him to sit down. I thought it was I completely was out of the picture. I thought he was not supposed to be doing that yet. Obviously, I was wrong, but there was a momentary thing of I wasn't. What was happening? Why was I doing that?
Wait, and in the Opryland scene, it struck me that, oh my God, he's one of the few characters that actually sees both Barbara Jean and Connie White perform because they can
Yep,
never perform together.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I forgot about that. Another thing in that scene where I stood up to fight, um, like you said, everything was improvised. And when I was a kid, I looked a lot like Howdy Doody, or a lot of people shamed me with that,
Oh.
and I took it as a element of pride. But and so people knew that story because we'd all been talking to each other about where we came from, what we did, and stuff like that. So when I sat down at the table and Tina said, "I think he looks like Howdy Doody," I almost went completely.
Did she come up with that on her own or?
Yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
so mean.
so good,
Yeah.
so good. No, that's the kind of stuff you pray for. Because then you got to tighten your gut. And
So, who would you say were your influences and your heroes?
this is so boring. Steve McQueen. Um,
It's not boring at all. He's amazing.
but I mean, it's so mainstream kind of. Uh, I didn't have like in the Bogart era and stuff. I didn't. Those weren't. I mean, I loved them all, but I didn't. Uh, I didn't really have the heroes. There were so many people that I looked up to that I was afraid of. I really wanted to work with Rod Steiger. Uh, oh gosh, they all just faded so fast.
Nashville must have put you in the room with a lot of these figures, at least at like mixers and things.
Yeah, it did. I got on the party bus. And I knew I'd known Elliot Gould before, and so I was in that group a lot with him and Bruce Stern and Nicholson parties like before Easy Rider, and so yeah, I was in the room with those guys. Would I have loved to work with Nicholson? Yeah, I'm not sure I would have been visible, but I would have tried. Um, all those guys, I did eventually get to work with Hopper, uh, kind of in this series I did in China,
Oh,
which was a disaster. Um, it was it was about two American detectives, one Asian and one black, but American, who were in China, and they would forever be going back to early lives that they lived and fight battles in those early lives,
wow.
and then come back to today. And everything that happened today was based on the battles that happened centuries before.
It sounds
And
interesting.
it was impossible to follow. It really was. And they had an action director and a dialogue director. And the action director just wanted you screaming and fighting. And then you'd get a sensitive director for the other scenes. And it was, and the scripts were very confusing.
Hmm.
But I had a really good time. Got to, spend a couple months in Shanghai. So
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the future. You have some projects coming up?
I have one little teeny project coming up with Steve Tobolowsky and waiting to hear on two things, but you know what waiting to hear means. He's
Yeah.
um, so, and I have one thing that hasn't come out, and I don't think it will. Um, a lot of the little movies that I've been lucky enough to do don't get a regular release date, and they either go to the festival circuit, or video on demand, or some such. Uh, but the good thing about those is they seem very grateful that I'm there, as opposed to who the hell are you,
Mm.
which happens otherwise. And I enjoy doing them because I feel really part of it, you know, as opposed to an add-on.
Right. Well, Betty Davis and Shirley MacLaine used to complain about how they'd get these younger co-stars who never bothered to ask them any questions, never cared about that. I'm curious. Well, actually, you worked with Joseph Cotton at one point.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Um, and I wish I could remember the stories. Basically, what I would do with Joseph Cotton, because he was very accessible and very nice, is I would ask him some question about the Mercury Theater at the beginning of lunch, and he would basically talk to the end of lunch. That was great. It was great.
Do you find that happening with you and Nashville on any of your recent shoots?
Yeah, but I feel it's, I feel like I'm occupying more space than I should when I do it. It's like I did a couple of these movies with a director back in Ohio. Um, Now I can't think of the name of them. Union Furnace,
Okay.
and a director named Nicholas Bushman, who I think is going to probably do all right. Uh, and several people, you know, it's in Columbus, so I'm a star. And people would ask me questions, and I hear myself talking, and I would have gone on for 10 minutes going, this is not why these people are here. Here, and so I would become uncomfortable. You know, if I've been trading stories with other people or something, but just that focus, one film that long ago, feels a little egregious
Mm,
to to go on about it.
wow. Well, I would say that is probably not the case. But if you're feeling that, again, it's another thing I understand
Are there
all too
any
well.
are there any actors that aren't insecure? I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean the cocky ones usually don't last, right?
Or they're really good.
Jane Fonda always said that she would be so nervous, before a shoot, always, and feel like she didn't know what she was doing. And to hear somebody like her say that,
I know I've heard that from other people, but when you're around them, although I haven't been around Jane Fonda, um, you don't see it.
mm-mm,
You know, you don't
yeah.
get to say, "Oh, she's nervous too." You know, no, they keep it under wraps pretty well. There was in I don't know why I thought of this. It has nothing to do with any of this, but I was um, playing poker with a group of people, and among others, it was like the Widows Club and two guys, and so it was like Barbara Sinatra and Jack Lemon's widow, whose name escapes me at the moment, Alicia
Oh
Farr.
God.
Anyway,
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. She's an actress too.
yeah, Dick Martin's widow, and anyway, sitting around, and people were talking about actors, and people saying bad things, and Alicia said, Well, Jack never said anything bad about another actor. And then there was a beat, and then she said, unless they were a bad actor. So I think, and you don't want to be pontificating. I think that's what it felt like sometimes when I would be questioned about Nashville.
Felicia Farr was her name.
Yeah, Felicia Farr.
Yeah.
And when I was doing this series in China, in Shanghai, there's a thing called English Corner, and people go there to practice their English. So they love it when a native speaker comes. So I went there and I was having a great time. And somebody said, "Does it bother you being asked all these questions?" I said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "I'm an actor and I'm not working right now, so let's go." But in
Well,
that situation, I'm fine because that's what it's about.
yeah. When was the last time you saw Nashville?
God, I haven't seen it since the 25th anniversary.
Wow. That's it. You may have already touched on this, but as we're wrapping up, I wanted to ask you, is there a moment from the filming or from the film itself that just stays with you more than any other?
Yeah, probably the phone call to my mother uh, because it was kind of the launching pad for the character in terms of, I think it was the first scene I shot. I'm not sure,
Oh,
but there was something about that. And I don't know what it was. We did one take, and thankfully something went wrong. We had to do another take. And I thought, you weren't thinking. You just wandered in there. And I went back and regrouped. And then the way I walked up and the way I went in and everything, I allowed all the stuff that he'd been going through for the last couple of days in Nashville to come in, and it just played out the way I wanted it to, and effortlessly. From the way I walked up to the throughout the scene, um, and and the last scene. I mean, you know, that was really, it was just fun. It was also fun, and this is a rude thing to say, because all those people were invited there for hot dogs, right? Nobody was paid. They were all just people from Nashville. They all got invited to listen to some music, get some free hot dogs. And I think there may have been beer, I'm not sure. But so nobody had any idea who I was. There was no camera near me. It was all shot long lens. And I plowed through those people when I went forward to shoot her. I just hit them hard going through, hoping somebody would knock me down or push me away or anything else and they didn't. But it was such a feeling of invincibility, uh, of plowing through them and then pulling out a gun and watching the reaction and seeing the reaction of people around me when I pull a gun out. None of them knew what was coming.
oh my God, they didn't even know about that?
No, 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 no.
Oh boy.
So that was fun.
It's so crazy because you think if something like that were to happen today,
Oh,
people would run screaming, but Altman had this thing. It's in the lyric of the song. You may say I ain't free, but it don't worry me. This idea that, okay, I'm not going to let it bother me. It's insane.
yeah, yeah. And now I probably would have been certainly tackled, if not shot,
Yeah.
especially in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Um, but it was an amazing release. Also, it was coming to the last shot, and I couldn't, had to leave it all there, and that was a wonderful way to do it. and the brilliance of, I mean, also the financial brilliance of having all those people there for free, but having them just be citizens was great.
It's amazing. I want to ask you if you have anything you'd like to add, anything you'd like to say in closing.
No, it's just I think there are still directors that work like that, because you hear people talk about Paul Thomas Anderson or Richard Linklater or people like that that allow the cast to contribute so much. And that's just the best way to make films. And it takes a lot of courage from the director. Cameron Crowe. It's just the freedom. It's just the fact that directors will give freedom to the cast, but that means casting actors you trust. Yeah. So it goes back to that. And once they do that, if they trust themselves, then they have no problem. If they trust their casting. But more of those movies that surprise.
Yeah. Well, David Hayward, thank you so much for taking the time out to speaking with me. This has been an honor.
I appreciate that. I really do.
And I think there are going to be a lot of people interested in what you have to say.
I'll be curious then.